Yeah.
So welcome to this latest Thrive Tribe interview. I'm delighted to welcome Jonathan Stanley, who joins us this morning. Welcome, Jonathan.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. Jonathan is a coach. He's into transformational coaching and helping people make big shifts. Has some really interesting things on his website relating to philosophy and the big questions in life. So we're going to have a conversation, see what happens. I think it'll be very interesting. So Jonathan, I've explained a little bit about the Thrive Tribe to you and what we're trying to achieve. Could we start with just asking you a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are and what's driving you nowadays?
No, sure, absolutely. I've been in kind of coaching and leadership and what I call the world of transformation for 24, 25 years now. I got into it completely by accident. Before that, I'd had one of those careers where I never knew what was coming next, but I loved all of it. Mm-hmm. But there was always a sense that there's something out there waiting for me, that the real future is out there. And one day I kind of more or less fell into a personal development course. A colleague of mine who I trusted enormously said to me, "You should do this." And what she told me I should do, I did. And I showed up, I had no idea what I was getting into at all. And I just completely fell in love with it. And that was my first experience of what I call transformational work, by which I mean that rather than making incremental changes in something, the whole world changes in a moment. And for me, I went into the course relating to myself, thinking of myself as someone who's a bit of a loner, not great socially. There are people out there who are party animals. I'm not. And that's fine. That's just the way I am. And for me, it was genetic. I've got brown eyes and I'm a loner.
Yes.
Nothing you can do about it. That's who I am. And I had this moment where I suddenly realized in the course that's not a given. I actually have a choice about that. The way I feel and behave at parties is a function of what I do at parties. And I'm just as capable of the next person just going up and talking to someone. Yep. And it sounds very easy, but when you're inside that experience, it is who you are.
Yes. Yeah.
And for me, that was a joy. I just kept going back and doing more and more. Eventually went to work for one of those companies I was doing courses with. Did my kind of basic training with them, moved into business consulting and personal coaching, and I've been doing it ever since. And the answer to that big question I had at the beginning, which is, what's the real thing out there for me?
Yeah,
I discovered it's touching people's lives. That's the way I say it. It's just, I love the coaching. I love working with individuals, having 1, 3, 10, 20 conversations with them.
Yes.
At the end of it, their life, not through me, but through what they've done, they're just living a different life. And it's just very precious to me.
And that's interesting. You sort of touched on the subject there a little bit of to what extent do we have control. I did a video the other day, Jonathan, on free will, which is a big raging topic at the moment in the science philosophy community. And I'm one of those people who's very curious, and reads all the articles, tries to get all the books and tries to figure it out for myself, and it's almost unanswerable in the end, isn't it? Because even if we're making free choices, were those always the free choices we were going to make? It becomes a little bit circular. Mm-hmm. But you were just touching there on something that I recorded in the video the other day, which is actually, I personally believe we have a lot more control than we realize, but we kind of give it up somehow, or just don't realize we have it.
Yeah.
So there are things we can do. We can intervene.
Yeah, we can always intervene. And in regards to that free will conversation, one of the mistakes people make is I think they try and get to the reality of the thing.
Yeah.
And the truth is we don't deal with reality. We deal with the world the way we experience it.
Yeah.
And whatever the truth is about free will, I have a choice. I have a choice to pick up that glass or not. Now, maybe it's all predetermined, but I don't experience it. We're just going to deal with life the way we experience it.
Yes, yes.
And I experience a choice.
Yes.
And for me, how do you get to that place? It starts with as you say, realizing that we have a choice, and we have a choice in any situation. Now, people often talk as though they have no options. There's nothing they can do. There's always a choice.
Yes.
And I think what people struggle with sometimes is the fear of making the wrong choice, but the fear of the consequences of their choice.
Yes.
You know, when you're stood on the top of the cliff, you have a choice to stay where you are or to jump. Now, you may not like the consequences of jumping, but it's a choice.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and partly free will starts with being willing to recognize there will be consequences.
Yes. And there's a dimension to that which is about accepting responsibility for your life as well, isn't there? Because I think the other side of that coin is that people say, but I have no choice because I have to do these things because of social pressure or family pressure or religion or culture. And they don't see it as a choice because the pressure is so great. Another thing that I've done a separate video on, immense social pressure. And that's getting worse, I believe, as technology enables us to know what other people think very easily.
Yeah.
In the old days, you might know how half a dozen people think. Now you know how everybody around the world thinks. So there's massive pressures on people, but that doesn't mean you have to do what everybody else is doing.
No, absolutely. You know, the choice is always there. And you have to accept there are consequences. Now, the question for me, and the question I think people come to in coaching very often, is it more important to have the approval of other people, or is it more important that I live a life that's real for me and that I'm doing the things I want to do?
Yes.
You know, there's a young guy I've been coaching recently, who's halfway through a second degree that he hates, having hated the first degree. And what he's coming to see is really he's having the career or setting himself on the course for the career that his father thinks he should have.
Yes.
Now, his father isn't going to live his life. He's going to live his life.
Yes.
And choice starts with actually stepping back and thinking, well, what's important to me? What do I want my life to be about?
Yes.
And that's a big question to ask.
Yes. And one of my core beliefs developed over the years through all the training and coaching that I've done is when you come right down to it, each individual is totally unique. I mean, there is no other person exactly like me. And when you start to, peel the layers on that, I'm very different to everybody else, even though I may appear the same. We tend to read too much into physical appearance, I think. You see types, you see different tribes and nations and all the rest of it. But actually, within that, everybody is completely unique, aren't they? And how can anybody else know what's right for you?
Yeah. And everyone has an opinion.
Yes. There's plenty of opinion.
There is no advice is not in short supply in this world.
Everybody has a view.
And the big move is to stop listening to the advice sometimes and listen to yourself.
Yes.
I kind of say to people, I don't know what I think until I start talking and I hear it come out of my mouth.
Yes.
You have to give yourself that space to think. And that's one of the ways that people use coaching sometimes. There are clients I've worked with where literally I sit here with them for an hour while they talk, and at the end they say, thank you very much, that was great, and they leave.
Yes.
I mean, almost literally there have been conversations where, I said nothing.
Yes.
It's quite unusual, but
yes.
It happens.
But if they're doing a great job, why interrupt?
People don't have the space to think because they're so busy listening to everything that's coming at them.
It's a great point you make. I have a friend who's also a coach. We've known each other for years, and we coach one another alternately once a month. And she very kindly quite often says, when she's coaching me, she often says at the end of the session, God, you're just so good at coaching yourself. And I say, yeah, but what you realize is I can't do that on my own. I need you to be there, and I need you to occasionally ask a question. And she does, brilliant ones, Wow, I hadn't even thought of that. And then she allows me massive space to just unravel it all in my mind and get it sorted out. So it's a really interesting key point, actually, already in this video, I think, for people to take away is, the best advisor is you. because everybody's looking for the answer, aren't they, from somebody else? Yeah. And not that there isn't great input, but in the end, when you come right down to it, making those big decisions, the best person to advise is you. And I mentioned to you freestyle thinking, Jonathan, that I've been doing a series of videos on. I'm trying to encourage people to use not only logic, but also intuition and how they feel. And I think if you can use all three things, because you mustn't throw logic away completely, I think, and just go with how you feel today. But if you can do all three things, you can get somewhere near to a rational, sensible decision and think for yourself, which is kind of the point I'm trying to get to. Yeah, where there's a lot of opinion and pressure to think in a certain way.
Yeah, and I think, come back to the word that you used earlier, responsibility. You know, there's two senses to that word for me, and one is more common than the other. And people talk about responsibility usually in terms of being willing to deal with the outcome of the decision.
Yeah.
You know, okay, well, you made the mess, now you clean it up. You're responsible for it.
Yes.
But for me, a much more important sense of that word is before the decision. And that's willing to look at the questions that come up like you have a say.
Yeah.
Like you can choose, like you are the source of what happens, even when it looks like you're not. And why would you do that? Well, you do that because it allows you to take control, or at least experience some control. You know, again, it comes up a lot for me in relationship coaching. You know, whenever someone comes to me to talk about a relationship, it's really interesting, but the problem is always the person who isn't sitting in the room talking to me.
Yes.
It's always the other person who's the cause of whatever's not working. And the coaching I give people most often is, how about if you looked at this like you're the cause of what's happening in this relationship? It's not about fault, it's not about blame, but how about if you looked at it like the way your partner is behaving is a function of who you're being and how you're behaving?
Yes.
Now, why would you do that? Because you can't change them.
Yes.
The only place you can do anything is over here.
Yes.
And if I change how I'm being in a relationship, if I say I'm causing what's happening, it puts me in the driving seat.
Yes.
Suddenly I can say, well, what if I was to do this? What if I was to say yes when I normally say no? You know, at least I'm sat behind the driving wheel now. And I can make some choices and make decisions, which I can't do if I'm just complaining about someone else. Yeah. So for me, responsibility is first about saying, I'm the cause of what happens next.
Yes.
You know, if this interview goes badly, it's not because you asked me the wrong questions, Paul.
Well, it could be.
You know, it could be. but I can't do anything with the questions. All I can do is take responsibility for the answers. You know?
I really love what you're saying, because it's forming a little model in my mind, you know, where we start with responsibility, and then we're literally, as you were saying there, creating the circumstances, the situations through how we're being, and potentially blaming other people for it. Because the thing that's been on my mind a lot lately is how can I help people to see that they are creative creatures? I mean, even when we're doing nothing, we're creating a reaction or a response. It's a bit like that old thing about you cannot not communicate. I mean, if you sit there silently and say nothing, you are sending a message.
Absolutely.
You can't not communicate. And a bit in the same way, I think you can't not create. You know, you're however you're being will impact the energy of others, and people will look at you and they'll decide, and that will cause them to act in a certain way or not. So we are, you know, I think more creative than we realize. We are causing things more than we realize. And if we were to realize that and take responsibility, we could proactively create end calls rather than accidentally do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we are you know, it's the other cliche, we're all connected. We're social animals.
Yeah.
So if you're part of a system of connectedness, if one part of that system is inactive or not doing anything, there are consequences. If one person, you know, an individual on a team can have a bad game, but it affects the team.
Yes.
there's always that interaction.
Yes.
If I'm in a bad mood, it affects my partner.
Yes.
If I call my daughter, that causes something. If I don't call her, there are consequences too. There's always consequences.
Yeah. Yes.
And one of the joys of it for me is you never know what was going to happen if you'd done the other thing.
Yes. Yes.
So have I made the wrong decision? Who knows? That one could have been better, could have been worse. I've just made the decision.
Yes.
Now let's get on with it. Let's live with it.
Yes, and there's really no way of knowing, is there? Because you can't spin the clock back and say, let's see what would have happened if I'd gone the other route.
Yeah.
Another reason I think why people perhaps get very stuck in making decisions, they have this fork in the road of some sort that they have to choose between, I don't know, education or career or relationship, whatever it might be. And it seems to me people very often are very nervous to make that decision because they're worried about getting it wrong.
Absolutely.
And yet, first of all, you can't possibly know what the outcome of the decision will be. You can make an estimation of it and you can try to choose the best way you can, but you can't know for certain. Definitely can't know what would have happened had you chosen the other path. So given that you can't know any of these things, anxiously worrying about that doesn't actually move us forward, does it?
It doesn't. And you never know where your life is going.
Yeah.
I was talking to my partner about this morning.
Yes.
One of my favourite stories is when I was, I don't know, in my mid-20s, I bought this huge house that I couldn't afford and rented it out, rented all the rooms out. I could either buy myself a one-bedroom studio,
yes,
or this huge place, 5-bedroom house in the middle of Chelsea.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the middle of Chelsea, just off the King's Road, 5-bedroom house, and I sold it for £63,000 in about 1982.
Yes.
Now, financially, do I regret that? You bet. But I said to her, look, if I hadn't sold that house, I wouldn't be sat here in bed with you this morning.
Yes.
We'd never met.
Yes.
But I don't regret that at all.
Yes. Yes.
You never know where life's going to take you.
Yes.
You were sharing, Paul, how you left your job 15 years ago.
Yes.
Was that the right decision? Who knows? Well, you didn't know at the time.
Yes. Yes. There was no way of knowing at the time. Yeah.
No. You jump.
And that's it's an interesting point. That's an interesting example because, I think people have to think about logic and intuition and feeling when they're making decisions. I think they have to try and take all of that into account. What I did know beyond any shadow of doubt at all when I did it was that it was the right thing for me based on how I felt. I mean, it was very, very strong, very, very powerful. And I actually had reached the point emotionally where I couldn't have made any other decision, So now logically, the logical thing to do, rational, well-being, financially thing to do would have been to stay where I was. Because I was jumping out of that into who knows what. But I knew deep in my soul it was the right thing to do, and it has been. So I couldn't have made the case rationally, I don't think, in a very convincing way to someone else. They would have said, you are nuts for doing that.
Yeah.
You're giving yourself up to the gods,
But there's no certainty. You could have stayed and been made redundant 3 weeks later.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. But here's another idea that's very powerful. It just occurred to me as I was listening to you talking there.
Yeah.
For me, and it's not an original idea, but there's a fundamental distinction between a decision and a choice. And people talk about them like they're the same thing. For me, a decision is what you do as a matter of logic. You look at the facts, you look at the circumstances, you make your list of pros and cons if you want, and then all that stuff on that list of pros and cons makes the decision for you. Okay, the smart thing to do on balance is X.
Yes.
I should leave my job, or I should stay in my job.
Yes.
Because that's what the facts tell me. But a lot of things in life, no amount of figuring it out will tell you what the right thing to do is.
Yes.
There are certain things where it's just a choice.
Okay.
Where you just say, okay, I've done all my thinking. I know what the pros and cons are.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, I've just got to jump one way or the other. And it's that willingness to accept that there isn't a right answer.
Yes.
You know, do you want chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream?
Yes.
Well, just take one. You know, do you stay in your job? Do you leave? Just go with it. You know, and it's that willingness to, if you like, to metaphorically toss a coin and live with the consequences that is a choice for me.
No, it's really interesting because I think, based on the people I've coached and trained and so on, I think where we default to as humans, and there's something about our brains probably that does this, I think where we default to is we generally take a risk-based decision, and that often is to not choose anything in particular because it feels risky to step out there. I'm thinking about you think about the people that you say wow about when you think about the lifestyles they lead, the businesses they started, and all the rest of it. It seems to me they found a way of overcoming that natural reluctance to take a risk, to say, no, this is absolutely what I want in life, and I'm willing to chance it and see what happens. You see what I'm saying? I suspect our natural brain default is be careful, something bad might happen, and that's enough to get us going. Maybe I'll postpone the decision for a few more months.
Well, I mean, the default is safety.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, for me, that I don't know this, but I firmly believe our brain is still a pretty primitive thing. And at the end of the day, what it's designed for is for a caveman who hears a noise in the bushes and needs to know, can I eat it or will it eat me?
Yes.
And unless you're pretty sure you can eat it, the smart thing to do is run away.
Yes.
You know, and that's what we're set up for.
Yeah.
You know, and we're still living like that. Oh, it's a risk. I better run away in case it kills me.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
The thing about the kind of the entrepreneurs is they seem to either almost have an appetite for the risk.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't occur for them as something to worry about. It's just, okay, well, it's like a game of cards. You know, you throw a card, you win, you lose, go again. You know, I love that. It's kind of this Winston Churchill saying, the secret of success is being willing to go from failure to failure with no loss of momentum.
Yes.
You know, I love it.
Yes. Because actually, when you're making decisions, you're deciding to try something. Excuse me. And the other thing I think people get stuck with is sometimes they convince themselves it's such a big decision, this is a life changer. If I get this wrong, my whole life could be ruined. But actually, you're just choosing the next step, basically. And with perspective, as you were saying just now, you know, in 20 years' time, you look back and say, actually, that seemed like a life-changing decision at the time, but so many things have happened since. There were lots of other life-changing things that went on the next minute. You know, I think we exaggerate, you know, the nuclear nature of some of these decisions, and again, it gets us stuck.
Yeah, and you can never tell which the life-changing ones are going to be.
Yeah.
You know, that example I gave you, I thought I was going on a 2-day training course.
Yeah.
It changed my life.
Yeah, exactly.
Changed my career, changed my relationship, changed everything.
Which raises another interesting point, Jonathan, if I could just build on that a little bit, which is the sort of, the role of synchronicity or chance, or what I like to think of a little bit as the flow of life, which I think is a very useful concept in terms of, am I struggling uphill right now? Am I pushing water uphill? Or does it feel like everything's kind of easy and I'm going in the right direction? There's something about, you know, there are things we can control about ourselves and changes we can make to ourselves, but there's also this whole process going on, Mother Nature and so on, over which we have zero control. And why not it? So why not try and find a way of swimming with it? And that's where I found in my life, for example, happy accidents start to happen. And you think, wow, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah, and sometimes, and it's one of these, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. The thing that spoke to me out of what you said is how when you're in those positions where it feels sticky, there's a temptation to draw the conclusion that there's something wrong. You and somehow I've got to get control over this, and I've got to turn it around, and I've got to change it.
Yeah.
And actually, very often the smart thing to do is just to go with it and give yourself the space to think.
Yes.
We're very impatient. I'm actually going through one of these periods for myself at the moment. There's a big shift in my business. A lot of the corporate work, which I have been doing, is disappearing.
Yes.
I'm doing much more of the personal stuff, which is something I wanted to do.
Yes.
But there is this sense in the background, well, this is a time when my life is changing.
Yes.
And I don't know what, if you like, the rest of my life is going to look like.
Yes.
And I'm really working hard to not know.
Yes.
To give myself the time to think, to let it emerge, to, if you like to take your word, let the flow find me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. I think people, all of us actually, having made a decision, we want instant results. We want it to happen now, so I want success, or I want happiness, or I want romance, whatever it might be. Right, I've made the decision. Where is it? And life isn't generally like that, is it? It's planting a seed, watering it, waiting for several summers to go by. And
sometimes it does. Sometimes it comes up. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yes. That's more realistic, I think, isn't it?
I mean, it's one of it's we all want to live in a very cause and effect world where I take certain actions and certain consequences follow.
Yes.
You mentioned the kind of the interest in existentialism in my coaching. Yes. One of the givens of existentialism is life is uncertain.
Yes.
And we pretend that it isn't. We pretend, we try and convince ourselves that it's very linear. Yeah. And if I do the right things will go the right way.
Yes.
You've been in the corporate world. I'm sure a lot of the people listening have. You work, you go to work, you do a great job to the best of your ability. You keep doing a great job. You keep producing results, and then suddenly you're redundant. You're gone. And life's uncertain. You don't know what's coming next.
Yes.
Everything's fine, and then you turn a corner and you crash the car.
Yes.
That's the reality of life.
Yes.
And there's something very powerful about accepting life the way it is instead of the way you'd like it to be.
Yes. And thank you for raising that. That's so important, I think. But to me, it seems a key part of happiness actually is acceptance versus resistance. The most unhappy people I meet don't like the way things are. They're resisting the way it is. Yeah. And philosophically, if you just can think it through for half an hour or so, you realize that resisting and being unhappy with the way things are that I cannot change is kind of futile. So it's challenging, but there's something about getting to be happy with the way things are, which is not to say giving up on life and not doing anything.
Yeah.
But there are things you can't control and you cannot change.
Absolutely. And maybe you can't be happy either all the time. There's a lot of thinking right now, almost like we have a right to be happy. And if we're not happy, there's something seriously wrong and it needs to get fixed. My experience of life is that with the best will in the world, there are going to be times where you are unhappy.
Yeah.
Now, I had a divorce in 2013.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very amicable, but it was not the happiest time of my life.
Yes. Yes.
My father died. Yes. I wasn't laughing through that.
Yes.
That's part of life too.
Yeah.
And it's about accepting, if we were happy all the time, happy would lose its meaning. It would just be normal.
That's right. Yes. Yes. That's why we should be happy to live in a country like England where the weather changes all the time so that we enjoy the sunshine.
Absolutely.
That's what we keep telling ourselves anyway.
Yeah, we were sitting outside in our little garden in the rain last night, in the cold, with our anoraks on, and a cup of tea, trying to keep warm. And thinking,
we're nothing if not stoic.
That's right.
Well, Jonathan, we've come to about the end of our 30 minutes. It's whizzed by, and there's a million things I could ask, but we try to keep these videos to about 30 minutes to make them reasonably bite-sized for people. So maybe you'd be willing to come back and do another one sometime. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I'd be thrilled. It'd be great. Thank you very much, Paul.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Bye
Thanks.
for now, everyone.